All right, hello and welcome to the Benzo Rehab Dungeon episode 51. It is July 23rd, 2021. I am your host, Michael Deebs. Joining me, as always, co-host Danko Suvin from the Instagram handle at DankDeluz.
Inshallah.
Also joining me is John, the producer, from the Instagram handle at Discopathic. And we have a special guest today joining us via satellite phone from an undisclosed location is Teddy K, who is going to give us kind of a rundown of Russian history, I guess, specifically in the framing of Russian nationalism. Would that be an accurate thing to say, Teddy?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't brief you guys at all, so you have no idea what's going to happen.
I don't. Yeah, no, you kind of seem to want us going into this blind, which not the first time.
No, it's just because I'm pathologically incapable with coming up with a plan. So
Russian nationalism and its consequences, though.
I mean, the thing about it is it's such a convoluted topic in that just again, I personally can't stand nationalism, but you can't really separate Russian history out from it, and especially what the Russians would call Отечественный, or rather the insular or literally the fatherland derived study of Russian history, domestic essentially, is so nationalism driven to this day and has always been. It's very difficult as even a student of history, because I am in no way a professional, to wade through the muck that is sometimes Russian history. A lot of the stuff is still being fought over to this day. It's difficult to.
So real quick before we start getting into stuff, I don't know if you want to give yourself a brief introduction. Obviously you're speaking anonymously, so
Yeah.
But maybe just go over like your background, maybe some information on like your study of this kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a professional in any way. I'm a first generation Russian immigrant to the States. I moved over in the late 90s. I was born and raised in Russia, went to elementary school there. I was there during the roaring 90s when Moscow was essentially the Wild West, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit. As a kid, it was very interesting because I didn't know what the hell was going on, and it wasn't until we moved to the States that, I grew up, that I even started looking into what the hell was going on at the time, and it was baffling that anybody made it out alive, that we made it out alive. But at the same time, it was decent times, because come 2000, right around the time when we moved to the States, something far more sinister started happening in Russia, and is continuing to spiral to this day, which again occurred on this axis of when Americans started to think Russia was chill, but in reality, Russia has been fucking spiraling over the abyss. So it's interesting from that perspective.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, just go ahead and start us off then.
Again, Russia is so difficult to just even wrap your head around, just because the concept of nation states and polities and states and whatever, if you want to get into the textbook stuff, nations have only existed since 1848, in my opinion. There was talk, the word nation was used, and nationality and that sort of stuff, but states were, of course, ruled by sovereigns or constituent assemblies or what have you, and that's different from the political definition of a nation. And that peoples, or whatever, the peoples that you would call Russians, aren't even really completely Slavs. There's such a amalgamation of different ethnicities and stuff in Russia that, frankly, even modern Russians don't want to admit to, because Russians love to pretend that they're this monogamous ethnicity. Just the very name Russia in English is one thing, but in Russia, there are several words for it. There's Россия or Российский, which is Russian from a sense of the state or the country. And then there's Русский, which is ethnic Russian. There are two
So that's
separate
not a
words.
slur, is it?
No,
I was always
it's
under
not.
the impression that was kind of like a slur term.
Yeah, Rusky.
And-
yeah,
and
but that is our word for ourselves.
I
The
shout that a
adjective
lot
is-
when I'm playing Tarkov and I shoot a Russian in the
Certainly,
face. I'm like, aha,
absolutely.
die, Rusky.
Yeah.
It's also,
Rush B. But
there's also, it's a really minor point that you ended up going over, but I think it would be interesting to people to listen to this podcast. But the beginning of nations as nation states as we understand them now, beginning in like the mid 19th century, that's an interesting concept, and maybe you agree with this. I hope that you do.
Please expand. Yeah.
But that, in my understanding, largely is the accumulation of a need for some kind of centralized control of this new form of what capitalism is, right? So we have the beginning of the enclosure of the commons in like the 16th century,
Yes.
and this ongoing kind of riotous accumulation, and this bizarre, especially in Western Europe. I'm not nearly as informed about something like Russia, but in Western Europe, you have this really bizarre series of essentially roving armies and these tied up debts where everyone owes everything, and it's chaos.
Yes.
And then you eventually need to have these firmed up national boundaries and kind of centralized state apparatuses in order to stop all of this from just becoming a bloodbath, right?
You bring forth an incredible point, Danko, in that indeed, I have already lied to you people. It's been what, a couple minutes, and I've already lied to you, because yes, you could say that the first nation state as such was in fact the capitalist birth of the United Provinces of Netherlands, which would have happened in the 16th century during the 1500s as their separation and war, the 80 Years' War for Independence from Habsburg Spain.
Right.
Which of course got folded into the 30 Years' War, that sort of shit. And again, emerging because they are this newfound, completely unheard of, or rather a more efficient version, because you have Florence and Genoa and Venice as a proto kind of capitalist thing with still aristocratic feudal roots.
So what you're saying, I think, in quite a few words, and I have the same problem, but is that we anarchists have to thank for the development of the nation state tulips, right? It's all because of tulips. Okay,
yeah, but also grain.
The
grain too. Netherlands was.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The Netherlands
food and roses, or bread and roses.
At one point, yeah, bread and roses, baby. But
Sorry, I'll stop interrupting now. But
no, please keep doing. I'll talk about fucking Tuscany and the Condottieri Wars for 2 hours if you let me. But yeah. So first of all, the Netherlands, because this capitalist fucking thing, became the breadbasket of Europe, and for God's sakes, the Netherlands is underwater, and yet they were still able to feed. So again, it's the emergence of this truly, I will call this a revolutionary system, completely upends this feudal existence. The Netherlands is able to resist Spain. Full stop. Absolutely, unashamedly, the strongest power in the world at the time. Full stop. Biggest colonies, all that sort of stuff. They're able to resist. So yes, in a sense, what I'd like to cover, and I guess, to backtrack about 10,000 years, is I'd like to talk about a series of revolutions that have occurred. And at this point, I'd like to make a shout out to a guy whose work I am unashamedly stealing, a fellow by the name of Klim Zhukov. Klim Sanich, привет. But again, he's kind of the historian that does a lot of work on this stuff. His alma mater is kind of more medieval history, but he's done his work oftentimes, and that sort of stuff. And a lot of this I will be unashamedly stealing. So full credit goes to him.
We'll have to.
There is absolutely no copyright law. There's absolutely no copyright law in Russia, so you don't have to worry about that. But
would you like to
for
spell
the
out?
listener, We'll just westernize the name and put it in the description.
Klim
I feel like that's probably the best.
Shukov. Sure, yeah, absolutely. He's a bald man with a mustache. What's up, buddy?
I'm having brain problems.
What's up?
He's trying to spell Klim Shukov and
Klim space Zhukov. That's the same spelling of Zhukov as the guy that leads the Soviet army in World War II.
Right.
Wait, what?
We'll get to that. That's in 5 episodes.
UKOV.
But no, so essentially,
and the culmination of all of these episodes is us finally getting around to Dugan, right? Because I think that's what all the meme guys want.
We will literally have to reenact World War II. I mean,
perfect.
We'll have to get our Napoleonic reenactment gear and do that stuff. But
I've got the Napoleon in exile hair actually. I got rid of most of it, but I have the same haircut.
Very good.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, the pre or post stomach cancer. But
well,
Teddy,
what's up?
I apologize. At the end of this week, my brain is completely broken.
That's totally fine.
Please spell that again.
That's fine. Klim.
Yes.
Zhukov. It should come up in Google as Russian science fiction writer, but he is far more than that. He is far more than that. The second Google entry is of course in Russian, but that's his Wikipedia page. That's what he looks like. And he is by profession a historian. But he's, I guess, more famous as a science fiction writer. But he writes some pretty hard sci-fi, and I enjoy it too. Awesome. But again, the guy's really focused on authenticity and that sort of stuff. They do. He has a YouTube channel that does breakdowns of inaccuracies and like how armor looks in Western fucking. He tore The Witcher apart. He tore it apart.
Oh, fuck! I think I've seen some of this guy's videos. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's pretty good.
Let's continue.
Yeah. Again, not a perfect guy. I do not vouch for everything he says. Again, in Russia, there is a lot of homophobia. There is a lot of racism in Russia to this day. I do not make apologies for it.
To be honest, we're only allowed to bring up people on this podcast we agree with entirely. So
gosh,
that's something that
we've only ever brought those people up. By the way, Nick Land said something really interesting on Twitter recently. Sorry. Okay, Teddy, please.
No, please tell me.
Where are we?
No, he
didn't. He never says anything interesting. It was something about cat boys, probably, or like hyper racism.
Yeah. I'm all about it. Not hyper racism. Cat boys. I'm all about cat boys.
Oh, we're all about cat boys. Yeah.
All right. So this goes back to the Communist Manifesto, but essentially, there's a series of revolutions that occur throughout human development. The first one being the Neolithic Revolution, wherein people that have essentially existed in this primitive anarcho-communist, or primitive anarchist state, you can define it as whatever you will, whether matriarchal or patriarchal or what have you, anthropologically settle down and start farming, start building palisades around their little settlements, start to war over land, that sort of thing. Eventually people realize that through having slaves, you can get a lot more shit done. So you have the slave owning revolution, and eventually you have these great cultures that are able to subdivide labor, outsource the labor to slaves so other people can read and other people can write and people can create works of art and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that's just how human society evolved. That's how Egypt comes to be, and Sumer, and what is it, Han China, or is it prior to that? This reminds me of the shit you guys were posting earlier with the Qin Shi Huang and all that. But of course, Rome had a very interesting slave system in that. Again, I am not apologizing for slavery. I will never apologize for slavery because it's horrible and it's terrible. But in Rome, people had a chance to become free, and some viewed it as kind of almost like getting started in a trade. You would move to Rome as a slave. You sometimes would sell yourself into slavery or be captured. But in Rome, you work X amount of time. And the possibility existed that you could come out with a Roman name, a Roman citizenship, you can do stuff. But towards the end of the Roman Empire, you have this kind of proto-capitalist, or rather imperialist, which is, again, the final stage of capitalism. You have this system of consumption in that the entire empire exists to quite literally supply Rome. Rome, a city of several million people in the ancient world,
which is
would
incredible.
again. This is right out of
Mind-blowing.
right out of Mary Beard's Meet the Romans and SPQR and all that. So again, Mary Beard is a wonderful classicist. If you guys aren't familiar with the work, please look her up. She's incredible. But yeah, as she talks about both the slavery aspect and the stuff that how you can be somebody in Rome, but at the same time, Rome chewed through people, living in squalor, living in filth, diseases, all that stuff. Rome is dirty, dingy, nasty, a horrible place to live, but at the same time, it's the only place you can make it. So
Rome
this place,
is just grad school.
yeah, Rome chewed
Yeah.
people alive. People died by the thousands. So there was this constant, literal migration into Rome since the very first days of the empire, to the until, of course, Rome was no longer the capital. First, it was Milan or Mediolanum, and then finally it moved to Ravenna, and then things got wacky. There's a bunch of podcasts I can recommend on that. The Fall of Rome, the History of Rome. There's a bunch of wonderful podcasts that I listen to. Again, I steal everything. I have absolutely no original ideas.
It's all it is, man. It's all
That's
No
all
original.
many of
There
us
is
do,
no
yeah.
OP does not post original content. But yeah, so again, the Northern Africa was essentially a factory for food. A variety of climate change has since occurred, but Carthage, Northern Africa around Tunis, all that stuff, it was all farmlands. So that was the breadbasket. Spain, they had clay and steel. In France, they had timber. Germania, nobody fucking wanted to touch because there was no fucking resources there. But and this is where we kind of finally start to come to proto-Russia a little bit. Russia doesn't exist. The Russian people do not exist. But this is key to essentially the entire development of the, I'd say the European world, is the Middle East, the modern day Holy Land. That, even in Roman times, is a portal somewhere else. From an economic capitalistic sense, that is the Silk Road, that is the gateway to a variety of things. And again, when money fails, you have spices, you have silk, you have these trade goods that are simply not available in Europe anywhere. And yet they have this solid commodity value. That's a huge part. We will revisit this again. I'm summarizing dozens of works here that I can't just. I'm summarizing dozens of works, dozens of authors. But this kind of portal is extremely important, and Russia will become a part of this portal because during the Medieval Ages, it will be one of the only routes by which you can reach this place until the Crusades. And that's when things change. Go ahead.
There's and maybe this bleeds into Russia. I have a feeling that somehow it will, but another thing that leads to the stability and kind of otherness of a lot of what I guess we would call the Middle East, even if we're like our
there's the Near
center
East,
is somewhere else, right?
The Near East,
but
we would call it in Russia.
Right. So part of the otherness and the stability of that region has to do, at least when it comes to comparing it again to like Western Europe, which is something I'm more familiar with, has to do with its accumulation of different kind of administrative cultures and states, right? So we have all of these different kind of modes of organizing and dealing with money and funding of armies and funding of cities that are coming from people like the Mongols, the Huns, the Turkish empires.
Oh, we'll get to that. We will get to that. Yes.
And so they're just so much better at organizing and funding things. And so they're able to deal with great swaths of territory, which I'm sure is also informed by Rome. But yeah, so
important while part that's there. Yeah, go ahead.
While everything else is collapsing in Western Europe, and just like everyone is just shitting their pants over like debt peonage for forever, the Middle East is significantly more stable, per my understanding, because of the fact that they have these systems of economics.
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, and partially, and again, this.
Partially is the best answer.
I'm probably going to use this phrase a whole lot because it just should be getting used a whole more lot, just in general, in normal parlance. Is it's nuanced. Because it's such a cheap answer, I know, because it's how you look smart at parties. It's really just more complicated than that.
It's not a cheap answer in my view, and
it's because
nuance
it's almost universally more complicated than people think about it. And it's far more complicated than I'm talking about it. This is the fucking 10 million thousand feet view.
And we're still going to do a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, and this will be just the very beginning. If anything, your viewer if there's anything your listener can gather from this, is that there's so much more that they can go and do their own research on, but not in the fucking QAnon way. In the you have to go sit down, and I have to use something that in my state we use, essentially an interlibrary loan program, and I have to go to my state's library shit, and I have to get it to my local library, and then I have a physical book sitting next to me, and then I have to open it, and then I have to read it, and that's kind of how I did that. But like, amongst all of it, obviously I have a job that has nothing to do with history. To my
if the listener wants to learn where to get books for
we can absolutely
less money, let us know.
Oh, I certainly have.
There are ways, if you haven't
Yes,
figured it out yet.
yes,
Listener,
of course.
to the listener, I figure everyone else here knows.
I was kind of wondering about how much
Also,
I can talk about that, but yes, I've come into the possession of a vast supply of electronic books recently. But there's still some things, some very rare things, like I'm sitting right next to a rare like 5,000 exemplar Napoleonic 1812 encyclopedia published in Moscow that you simply cannot buy, and they have it in my state university's library sitting. And I even saw like where it was kept. It was like stack whatever, reserve, archive, whatever. No one will ever look at this. And this is a $250 book that isn't available.
Right, exactly.
And that sucks. But at the same time, libraries are great because I was able to find this.
Exactly. So, I'm still looking for, because I'm too lazy to go to the library, so God bless you, but I'm still looking for one essay by William of Aragon, and I've been looking for it for fucking months, and I know that I could get it, but I just want to get it on my computer. Where I want to buy it, and I can't. It's just not going to happen. Anyway,
interlibrary loans are a wonderful thing in my state.
Amazing. Yeah.
They are completely free. It just takes time, and yes, it literally takes someone on a truck loading it into and driving it to my library. But it's free. It's amazing.
It's like Amazon, right?
It's incredible.
Like Amazon Prime.
Ooh, yeah. For all the, I'm not going to make Gen Z jokes here. My daughter is a Gen Z, and she will put me to the guillotine, and I will deserve it. And all the baby leftists.
Hopefully all of our
when they guillotine us all for not being left enough, I will cheer them on. So
me first.
Pigs.
Yeah.
Tired of my existence.
First our children came for the sock dems, and I let it happen because I was not one of them.
Yeah. But so anyway. Where did we leave off? Rome, right? So Rome.
Yeah.
You made a fantastic point about coinage. Because for vast swaths of the Dark Ages, and even a vast majority of the medieval ages, a coinage in general was not available. So you see the breakdown of coinage and the reintroduction of barter. It's a very simple throwaway term in terms of, with trade in kind, things kind of slow down. But it's so much more nuanced than that. It decreases the range of transport. It decreases the need to communicate. These incredible, simply wondrous trade routes that the Romans set up. Again, all worked in slave labor, because this is the engine of conquering other people. So you can take their shit, so you can make them slaves, so they can go to fucking the province of Africa or Libya and make food. So you can have a vase or an amphora that's made in Spain go to Carthage, where it gets filled with olive oil, and then it goes to Rome and it ferments, and then in Rome there's a whole fucking mountain made out of broken amphorae. It's a public exhibit. It's an entire man-made mountain of amphorae. But
the coinage also allows for a certain kind of not just for these systems to have reach, but also stability in them, right? Where it's going to significantly decrease the amount of piracy that ends up taking place, ironically, because as something is en route, there is this stabilized central currency instead of just someone who's walking around with all of this olive oil or something and saying, well, this is mine now, or even your own army doing it.
What ends up happening is, that's a wonderful point, because that leads directly to feudalism, is instead of coinage, you have to have, the only kind of payment is in food. And you need a dude or a dudette, mostly a dude, that can protect
Sometimes
you in case motherfuckers come over and take your food. And what do you pay him in food? So now he no longer has to farm, so he can just be a soldier all the time. and he can ride his horse around and stick bad guys with his fucking little spear. But in
division of labor, though.
turn, you have to feed him, and he doesn't feed himself. And it's not a long time until the dude with the spear realizes, like, hey, I could probably get more food from these guys because they don't have spears. So again, feudalism is a beautiful thing, and feudalism was one of those revolutions that was not immediate. And it was through absolute, they're called, but they aren't called the Dark Ages for nothing. And it was absolutely bloody, horrible, terrible fucking revolution in that it took a long time. It took so much death. And anybody that argues against accelerationism and shit like, oh, don't worry, changes will happen. The feudalism took natural change. And it was 300, 400, 500, 600 years of just blood. So talk to anybody who's like, oh no, things will happen peacefully, just gradual. No, direct them to feudalism.
Hillary Clinton, feudal overlord. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the breakdown of these trade routes. The empire falls apart. You get these smaller communities, these insular communities. In Rome, people could absolutely travel. Peasants would travel. It was, again, this emigration to Rome, perfectly possible. You can take a ship. You are in Palestine. You can go to Rome. You could go to Gallia, France. You could go to Germania, whatever. You could do that, even as a middle class, lower class person. In the early Middle Ages, Dark Ages, that does not happen. You don't leave your village. You become more insular. Traditionalism kind of sets in. Again, during the classical period, you had, as Alexander Dugin would go on to argue, you have examples of non-traditionalist thought. You have people with some modernist thought. Using reason and science. You have people with postmodernist thought, like he brings the example of Epicurus, in that you just break everything down. Some things don't matter at all. I'm just going to live for my pleasure or whatever. Again, I'm not super familiar with, but he brings up the example of Epicurus. Yeah, just hang out, whatever, man. Good food is tight. I mean, Epicurean is the word I know.
Right.
But
I mean,
yeah,
that's a pretty good summary of this philosophy. Yeah.
This occurs, the empire breaks down, but the inherent value of silk and spices and the Silk Road stuff, that remains. That trade continues to go on. It's just taken over by other agents, that sort of stuff. But again, it holds its value. And one thing that I've learned just reading and listening to stuff is that at the highest echelons, people were essentially never religious. Even during the depths of the Crusades, the nobles were like, yeah, we're literally here just to loot, make our little fiefdoms bigger, and just fucking rake it in. 100%. There are accounts of this. There are, even when they tried to hide it, bishops and archbishops and counts and margraves and whatever, and everybody that goes, everybody knows. It's all super tongue-in-cheek, and you can read it, the reading it in Latin, it's like, yeah, okay, so this guy wanted this fief, and then they kind of had to fight over it, and then it was which is why, again, go ahead.
Sorry, finish your thought.
I don't have a thought anymore. Continue.
No,
there is no thought. Continue.
No, this is actually something that we're going to be talking on bringing down the grindhouse with on Jesus. My words are broken. Your thoughts are gone. My words are broken.
Oh no!
I'm going on to bringing down the grindhouse.
Together we have Joe Biden.
Together we have. Look here, you dog-faced pony soldier. But yeah, so I'm going on to that podcast, and that's going to be one of the big focuses, is talking about how the religiosity and the belief in certain types of things like witchcraft, or religiosity in the larger sense, have largely been kind of tongue-in-cheek, and also understanding that even if people don't believe something, they will still act upon it, and they will still convince people beneath them that it is in fact the case. The literate classes very rarely seem to believe the things that they are saying and reading, which is pretty fun.
And again, that being said, is this whole, we like to think, due in no small part to Game of Thrones and Monty Python and Hamlet and every single piece of historical fiction, nonfiction piece of media that we've seen, peasants are stupid.
No,
people at lower levels are stupid. They're dirt farmers, whatever.
Yeah.
Even the illiterate, even the time people have always been intelligent.
Yeah.
People have been vastly ignorant of really, really common things that we find to be completely obvious now. People were very ignorant of a variety of things. But
Stupid peasant. You don't have
Yeah.
an electron microscope to check out what a fucking atom is? You're
Yeah.
dumb as fuck.
Yeah. A nice example is in the 1890s, these recently freed serfs in Russia. This is jumping way ahead, but these recently freed serfs, they're barely learning how to read at this point, and they're writing petitions to the government. And it's
Awesome.
not anything crazy. You know what their petitions say? Again, there's historical records of this. You can look this up if you
Fuck you,
know Russian, I
dude.
guess. But yeah, it's literally things like, hey, it's too late for us. We understand. Open up schools. Teach our children how to read. We understand that it's too late for us. Teach our children how to read. Hey, the priest, he steals from us. He takes all our fucking money. Can you please kick him out? Again, so everybody, like, there's people that are like, Russia is an inherently orthodox country. Russia's super religious. And it's a very Russian nationalist kind of thing to say. Putin and all that love touting that shit. Russia's a religious country. No, the priests have always robbed people, always, forever. So whereas the people may have been inherently spiritual and religious, maybe in their own household, and of course everybody identified as Orthodox because it's unthinkable not to, But the whole thing, it's like, please, we know it's too late for us. Teach our children how to read because they'll need it. This is important. Get this fucking priest out of here. So like it's sensible thing. It's things that you would accept people nowadays to be like, hey, like it's important. It's not like give us some more bread or some shit. Like it's they're forward thinking. And of course, you have to consider, again, this is me circling back to 15. Russia is the world's biggest country, right? World's biggest polity state, whatever the fuck. I will always trip on this because I don't fully agree on definitions of this thing. World's biggest country. You know how much arable land in Russia there is, really? Something like less than 30% of it is actually arable land.
Right.
And all of it is, or at that point, was already taken up by landowners and stuff. So the agrarian question is the direct cause of the Russian Revolution. There's so many other causes, but it is an unresolved agrarian question coupled with recurrent droughts, coupled with agricultural practices that were essentially the same since the 13th century, full stop. And of course, after that comes collectivization, and droughts actually did not stop until after collectivization was put into effect, but that brought into it a whole bunch of other shit. But it wasn't until World War II that droughts in Russia completely stopped. And that was in part because of collectivization, in part because of mechanization of agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms, it's so easy for us sitting as Americans in America in 2021, wherein agricultural products are still the number one export in America to this day, despite the fact that all the shit we do, our biggest export is still agricultural produce. But food was so important. If the reason no innovation happened was because if you try something new and it doesn't work out for you, you die. Your shit doesn't grow. Your mother dies, your father dies, your grandfather dies that's still living with you, and he doesn't do anything because he was a peasant for whatever. Because you have these large family units. A home would contain 2-3 generations living together, sometimes including in-laws and whatever. So the traditional dvor is the Russian term, which literally means, oh god, I forgot. Dvor is like god damn it. Essentially like an enclosure. A dvor is what happens between two houses, but it's essentially in order for tax purposes, because again, stupid peasants, they were taxed per dvor. So what they would do is they would build several houses and enclose them with one pasture, so they would only have to pay taxes for one. Again, these stupid peasants didn't know what the fuck they were doing, but
fucking around tax liabilities.
Yeah.
No,
and again, taxes in kind all the way since forever.
To chime in a little bit here.
Go for it.
I think it's like one of the oldest myths of like historical thinking is that people of any given time were like stupid, or like, the thing that's always said about the Dark Ages was like, oh, everybody was really dumb and backwards thinking back then. And it's like, no, they were living in like perfect, logical, rational ways given the time period they were in, and
moreover, they were
what they had accessible to them, or whatever the political climate was at the time, like they wouldn't have survived if they were so dumb that they like couldn't
Oh, yeah.
couldn't
In
logically
a lot of
think,
ways,
you
in a
know?
lot of the ways they were in a lot of ways they were far more competent than us, just because of the
Absolutely.
requirements of life at the time.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
Um,
the
I'm pretty
same.
sure that that many, like, they're always like, oh, the Arabs discovered algebra or whatever, but like
Yeah.
all the solar calendars and like civilizations that had to have known that the world was round back in their ancient Mayan
Ptolemaic Egypt, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
that these
Yeah.
people are doing like advanced math, it wasn't
Yeah.
just an empire in the Middle
Yeah,
East.
they just didn't have like a
Yeah.
formalized
Yeah.
system of it yet.
Yeah, flat Earth
And
didn't come around till, what is it, 1995 or whatever?
Right.
Yeah, like
The same
ancient-
thing also gets.
Go ahead.
The same thing also gets applied to different socioeconomic classes, right? And we've talked about this before on the podcast, where rich people live in the future and poor people live in the past, right? And all you need to before I would say that all you need in order to prove that is the fact that rich people are always working with futures.
Haha.
But I mean, genuinely true though. I mean, right?
Stonks.
But that you do have this situation where, because people are poor, we think that they're backwards temporally and otherwise, where they live as if they're medieval and they are stupid, right? So there's always this application of, well, if you're not that well off, then it must mean it's because you're in this dumb asshole, right?
Yeah.
So
At the same time, all the pottery that we find from 10,000 BCE and whatever. China is the first place pottery is found, of course, because China's ahead of us in every way. Always, it's
Right.
the perfect little. They have the perfect microcosmic climate. As I've always supported a massive population. That's one glaring hole in my knowledge is China. I need to brush up on my Chinese history. Yeah, it's just, again, such an incredible. Not to say, of course, preface it with that I like the Chinese government. They are trash, but again, one thing that you'll find is, like, I disagree with every type of government that you can bring up. Like, yep, they were trash, everybody's trash.
Yeah,
You're
not
in
not,
good
not a
company.
terrifically pro government podcast.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But no, again, at the lowest level of society, there's valuable historical records. If someone couldn't read, they left some other kind of trail, but everywhere. And I hate to get idealistic here because I'm a huge fucking cynic, but again, throughout the entire history of man and just recorded history, non-recorded history, there's always these moments of communalism and caring for each other. Again, you have peasant communes. You have peasant communes in the Urals and in Siberia until the 20s and 30s, essentially living independently. Every once in a while, a tax collector will come by and you'll give him his shit. But these are completely self-ruling polities, and they were fine. So again, it's and to a certain extent, you have these peasant republics in the Dark Ages that, again, were fine until some dude with a long spear and this shit called chainmail, which was like God mode, would on a fucking big old horse would come and fuck your shit up. And the feudalist revolution, especially knowing what I know now, has been one of the most brutal fucking things to happen to the human race. That being said, despite all this shit happening in the Dark Ages or the late Roman Empire, people still think Rome exists. Not the city, but the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire fully exists in this people's mind for a long, long time, through the Middle Ages.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have Western Rome, Eastern Rome, the Holy Roman Empire. These things aren't a term. It's the Roman Empire. Who's the emperor in Rome? Oh, it's this guy. It could be the Byzantine emperor. It could be the German fucking Habsburg. That's the Roman emperor. They didn't acknowledge that the Roman Empire had fallen until like the 18th century, historically. They're like, oh, I guess Rome fell, huh? But yeah, people were like, we're living in the Roman Empire. Sure, there's been some changes, but is there an emperor? Yeah. Does he make coin? Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Is it a super advanced civilization? In the case of Byzantium was like fucking aliens compared to Western Europeans in like the 10th, 11th, 12th century. It was like that's one of the reasons why the Crusaders fucking sacked Constantinople, because it was a city unlike anything they'd ever seen in their life. Even Rome, It was
Yeah.
it was so incredibly
I mean,
well. And again, everything comes down to
look at
economics.
like just look at like a medieval castle and then look at the Hagia Sophia, right?
Mhm.
Like it's that on its own fucking tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. A huge
Incredible.
medieval city would be a huge, gigantic medieval city. Paris, the biggest medieval city in
Right.
Western Europe. 10,000
Only
people.
got its cool building like
10,000
in
people.
the- 10,000
Constantinople is something like 250,000.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. It was incredible when the Crusaders in the Fourth Crusade, which was the funnest crusade, because they didn't go to the Holy Land even. They went and they sacked Constantinople, and it was by a variety of really fun shit that was completely capitalistic and shitty. They're like, oh, how did we get here? Oh, we might as well like it was like that.
like horseshoe rules of
Yeah, it was, oh my god, and the
Close
Pope
enough,
was in
right?
on it, and it was, oh, it's so shitty.
But just
Yeah.
imagine how fucking big your city's dick must be for you to maintain these huge populations while like Belisarius and his eunuch are killing people in the Hippodrome. Like
Yeah.
you slaughter like, you know, thousands of people in a Coliseum one day because there was like a sports riot, and you still have people living there in the fucking hundreds of thousands.
Absolutely.
Like they
Well,
just don't
again,
give a shit. It's like, no, there is no better place than this. Best city in the world, I swear to God.
Well, again,
like
because
New Yorkers.
Constantinople is and New York is very similar in that it's the flow of shit.
Mass graves and
it's the flow of goods, people,
Yeah.
slaves,
Yeah.
commodities, etc. The prestige, everything flows in. And it flows into the imperial city. This is the case with Rome. This is the case with Byzantium. This is also going to be. This is going to be the case in St. Petersburg.
Hmm.
So this is, again, because Russian nationalists, we're the third Rome.
Yep.
Right.
100%.
Right. Yeah, I've heard
100%.
that quite a lot, and I'm so curious about
Again,
it.
why does this start? This starts when Constantinople gets sacked by the Crusaders. It isn't it in the Russian Orthodox. This is right when the right after, relatively soon after, less than 100 years after Catholicism and Orthodoxy split. Now, they've been having problems for a while. They've been having problems since the Council of Nicaea in the 400s.
They're
finally
still
split, and
having
at
problems
first,
to this day, aren't they?
but they're considered in communion, which is a fancy fucking Catholic way of saying that. I guess they're just kind of gently astray, and this is kind of how it was during the 13th century, the early 13th century. Is they're still Christians, right? So let's go help them out. The reason the Crusades got started in 1099, the early or late 11th century, is the Byzantine emperor asked the Pope for help. So at the time, again, we're different Christians, but hey, we're Christians. Let's help each other out, right? But during and after the sack of Constantinople, they had to manufacture the reason, right? And part of it, there's so much more nuance. But hey, these Orthodox, they're actually bad. The reason we had to go and kill 50,000 of them or whatever is because they're actually making a travesty of our Lord. So they're not just Christians anymore, but they're actually worse than the Saracen sons of bitches that we've been killing in the Holy Land for the last 100 years. They're actually worse because at least the heathens, they're not perverting our faith, but these Orthodox bastards, they're taking our Lord and they're turning they're worshiping demons at this point, So that's a big thing. And of course, it's counterbalanced by the Orthodox saying the same shit about the Catholics, et cetera, et cetera. And at this point, the fall of Constantinople is actually a huge, huge shock to this nascent Kiev, Muscovite, Vladimir principalities that are already Orthodox.
Do you recall what year the fall of Constantinople was?
1200s sometime.
1200.
Either 1200s.
I mean, that's approximate enough. Because
this is the first legit sack of Constantinople. Of course, there's the final sack of Constantinople by the Ottomans, etc. But at that point, the Byzantine Empire is literally Constantinople and a couple islands in like Ionian Greece.
Something else that might kind of blow people's minds is just the fact that when it just drawing it back to this idea of like how long Rome and like Rome variants are around. The sack of Constantinople somewhere in the 1200s. We have that occur, and then it's still like 300 years at the very least before like the sack of Rome by the Holy Roman Empire.
Do you guys know when the Roman Empire ended? 1805.
Okay. Jesus.
It was much later than people
because the Holy Roman Empire.
Okay.
So
okay. Right.
after Austerlitz, or was it Austerlitz, or was it Marengo? It's either 1800 or 1805. But
Wow.
Napoleon essentially defeats the Austrian emperor, and he's like, these German states, let's reorganize them. Let's call them the Confederation of the Rhine, or the Rheinbund in German.
Right.
And then at
And
that
that's
point, these German
only
states
the
are
amount
no
of time
longer.
between like now and before the beginning of capitalism.
Oh yeah.
Like it's
way
that small of a time
yeah,
period.
yeah. So yeah, the Holy Roman Empire, which is you can
Yeah.
say that it's a successor because of Charlemagne. And again, getting into Charlemagne is the Pope said it's okay, and they dug up a document that didn't exist. And anybody that fucking sits down nowadays and knows Latin and knows conventions of Latin writing and looks at that fucking document says, and like, this is clearly a fucking forgery. They clearly pulled this out of their ass. Some monk fucking sat there and wrote the script that supposedly Constantine wrote or whatever. So obviously
And
Charlemagne became
no
Holy
true
Roman Emperor.
Roman would
No.
ever name someone Charlemagne.
Yeah.
Well, it was Carolus
Not gonna
Magnus,
happen.
but it was the fact that Constantine at one point gave rule of his empire to the Archbishop of Rome, who was not even the Pope at the time. That was what it said, and that was the kind of the spiritual success, and therefore now the Pope can vest this Frankish chieftain with a kingdom and be able to call it the Roman Empire. And that's what.
Wild.
And of course, Franks, they were Germans. The Franks are a Germanic tribe.
Right.
So so go ahead, man. I'll just keep talking otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's pretty funny because I learned a lot of Rome through art history. So like you experience like I guess propaganda with I guess some background.
Of course,
like
you have to. Anybody that learns Latin too is like, oh.
Yeah, like
all the-
like didn't Charlemagne and the Archbishop have like political problems with each other?
Oh yeah, well they all
Yeah,
did,
no, like-
because these archbishops were all nobles. They were second sons, third sons of counts, dukes, etc., which of course are all Roman terms. A dux, D-U-X, that's a Roman military title.
Yeah.
And which of course evolved to a duke, all of this stuff. Again, which brings me further back to my point. People thought the Roman Empire was still a thing. That's why you have very few emperors during the medieval ages. The only emperor is the Holy Roman Empire. Nobody could dare call themselves an emperor during this time. Everybody was a king, max. And of course, all kings would still, they wouldn't pay homage, because again, that's a very formal thing. You would pay homage to your liege lord, but they would acknowledge the emperor as, hey, you're the only guy on this planet besides God that's kind of over me in some way, in this spiritual way. Go ahead.
I just realized in such a funny way is that both of the like great superpowers, I mean, minus China, I guess, but like 80s superpowers, fucking America and Rome both have some kind of stated or unstated continuance of the Roman Empire, like as their inspiration. And you could say that the Roman Empire still hasn't ended, and it's just split into two extremely arbitrary, massive superpowers that want to fuck one another.
Yeah, there's wackadoodles in England that believe that England and the UK is a spiritual, not spiritual, a very literal continuation of the Roman Empire. And there's also
I want to believe that. I want to believe that because it would be so pitiful.
No, there's something more pitiful. There are people in Britain that, as part of nationalism or something, there's a legitimate group of people in Britain that believe that they are the true Israelites as well. So there's that
They're
angle
just Mormons. They're just British Mormons.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So again, founded on as ridiculous a fucking religious premise as the Mormons are, is the Anglican Church, which of course in America is called Episcopalian, because you don't want to be called Church of England after your country decides to declare independence. That would look weird. So you rename yourself and now you're the Episcopalians. But in reality, that's Anglicans.
Church.
Yeah, that's Church of England. Yep.
Yeah, my grandma was Episcopalian. My
Church of England.
My grandpa was an atheist, and I guess my grandma was too. She didn't go to church.
Do you note they have a little shield? Do you remember what's on their on the little shield flag? It's a red cross on a white thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's the flag of England. Yeah. Look up the Episcopalian flag real quick. It's a shield with a cross of St. George, and I think in the top corner they have some sort of blue shit. But yeah, the Episcopalian Church is 100%.
too much
Yeah.
of a
So it's Church of England. But
harsh
another
American.
interesting statistics, which goes back to, well, not statistic, but it's just kind of a nifty thing, is the vast majority of like old rich people in the States are Episcopalian, because you got the whole Daughters of the Revolution, Cincinnati Society, essentially, whatever. All these people are, you know what I'm saying, like the old fucking Mayflower people.
Right.
They're Episcopalians. So I
Right.
think you're in America, if you're Episcopalian, you are statistically likely to be far more wealthy than people of other denominations.
That checks out. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I told you I was going to have lots of digressions because I have these nifty little fuckeries to insert.
No, I love it.
Weren't we talking
And-
about Russia?
And I keep
when's the last
making
time
this
we talked
worse
about
for
Russia?
you. Yeah.
This is why I
let's
said
try to
this
go
is
back
I
to
also
Russia,
know
yes.
fun facts.
This is going to take a while, unless you're like, hey, the listener wrote in and they are just not having it. So
They say they hate
the listeners
you,
don't write in. Don't worry about
but
it.
they hate all of us anyway.
Please don't write in. Please don't write in.
Yeah. Only write to Teddy. His email address is his phone number.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Rome, Russia.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's so fucking
Where are
weird.
we?
And people are 100% convinced that, yeah, we're the third round. Completely unquestioned. It became a thing, I think, even before Peter's time. But during Peter's time, it was like, yeah, we're the third Rome, motherfucker. But yeah, so we've completely skipped the fact that mid 1200s, I think, Fourth Crusade.
Nice.
Type in Fourth
It's a good time
Crusade,
to
John,
be.
please. I'm already giving you orders.
It's
John?
the 1200s. We were looking
I've
at
already
it
got
on
it
the
up.
stream.
First sack of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade. The year
Beautiful.
12.
It was 1203.
Oh,
It's my
nice and
favorite
early.
year.
Yeah, there you go. Good year. Good wine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, we've completely skipped heretics and different denominations of Europeans, which has an
If you wanna
effect on
hear-
the. Go ahead.
No, I'll let you finish.
I was gonna get into the Lollards and the Bogomils and the Waldensians and the fucking all the heretics that weren't called well, they were called heretics, but back in the day, heresy just means I forgot what it's called. I think it just means differing opinion or something. It was really mild. The Greek word heretic actually means like, hey, I just have another opinion, man, and that's totally chill, essentially. Until they became like heretics, it's time to kill them.
Right. My understanding of these terms is that pagan functionally means one who does not believe. Heretic means that there's a disagreement, and heathen means that you're a fucking creepy woodsman.
Well, it's in Christianity. Heathens are like Muslims, so they're people that are not even remotely close. Whereas to Muslims, we are people of the book.
Yeah, I mean, a heathen is someone who lives in the wilderness.
No. A heathen is someone who
heath, right?
I guess maybe, but I guess
so. It just a total outsider.
Yeah, whereas a pagan
that's what I think the etymological.
I always thought the pagan was someone that was polytheistic. I guess maybe, I don't know. In any case,
I thought it was just somebody who believed in a god that wasn't Christ. Or
that's heathen. That's heathen.
I think there might be overlap
to the Muslims. That's infidel. An infidel is someone who does not believe in the God. So, whereas again, it's all really just super pagan. Again, the people that I like to listen to and read, they like to put forth this hypothesis that Christianity, and by extension Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism are all super paganisms. Especially Christianity has been wonderfully successful in amalgamating these truly pagan disciplines and beliefs and practices, and they amalgamated it to essentially Jungian archetypes. They were able to bring all this shit together in a beautiful, palatable way, and present it as a super paganism. Like most of Psalms are essentially magic. They're like magical fucking command words, like the Lord be my shield and protecteth me from la 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 la. That's essentially they're chanting magic. It is a pagan magic that they're chanting. To be my sword and my shield and striketh my enemies before. That's essentially it's no different from any kind of paganistic ritual. It's hard coded into the Old Testament, and it's hard coded in a lot of places in the New Testament too. We can talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean that's we don't want to get into like a thing about like poetics and grammar and stuff, or we will stick on that all night and it'll never end. But I just did I delved into my the deep end of the spectrum. And
Autism. I'm a big fan of autism.
Yes, I didn't want to say it because I've had some autistic listener has informed me that sometimes our feelings are hurt by it.
I'm pretty sure I'm on the spectrum. So
I think we all
go
are.
ahead.
But anyway, yeah. But so etymologically speaking, though we cannot always rely on etymology in order to give us the meanings of words.
Please, I can only get so wet.
Heathen meaning from like the total outside or the wilds. Pagan.
That's like an Anglo-Saxon word then, right? Heath is like that's like a Saxon word.
Pretty much all of these except for the Greek heretic.
Hereticos.
Heathen meaning from the wilds outside, pagan meaning from the villages.
So like druids. So like druids.
So pagan meaning from the villages, which is funny because it produces a gradient here, right, of different forms of outsider, which is something fascinating in my workshop, which I will again, plug at the end.
I'm a fan of your workshop.
Right.
I love your workshop.
We have been talking about kind of on and off. We've been talking about the village versus the city, and so I think that this is something I'll have to drag in at some point.
That is such a wonderful.
Pagan. Isn't that great?
That will read into so much in the coming of the Russian Revolution.
There you go.
That is such an important aspect of that.
And the last one, and huge in America too, right? And the last one, heretic, comes from the Greek which means able to choose.
Yeah.
So one
that's right. Yeah, it's a choice. Yeah, it's a choice. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a choice, man.
Beautiful kind of. So the heretic is the one that's closest to you, which also makes sense with something like the Spanish Inquisition, right? Where it's people. It's only people who have chosen to be Catholic that are heretics, right? Because you then doubt that they have chosen to be Catholic at all. You used to be a Jew. You used to be a Jew. Are you still a Jew?
Russians had heretics too. I mean, it's this Greek term that we use. Again, Catholicism means universal. Orthodox means original beliefs. Both churches are supremely adamant that they were first, and in a way, they're both right because they are both offshoots of original Christianity. That's why I don't deal with Protestantism as a joke to me. In that they had some.
That's fair.
I'm saying this as an atheist. They had good points. In the 1500s, Martin Luther had wonderful points because Catholicism was super corrupt. Still is super corrupt. Before then, was super corrupt. But the whole
democratizing it, great. But when you change the theology and make it so that now you have like a bifurcated destiny,
it has
kind of thing.
And then the whole
sola gratia doesn't work.
Sola scriptura is ridiculous because what translation are you talking about? What translation?
Sola scriptura,
what language?
Sola gratia and sola fide are all, none of them make any sense.
Oh my God.
None of them make any sense at all.
My Latin pronunciation mental cells are just dying and bursting as you say that.
But I'm agreeing with you as I mispronounce all of them because I grew up with Methodists and Lutherans.
Yeah, again, they had wonderful points and they developed science and all that stuff. But theologic, and again, I say this as a probably anti-theist. I'm worse than an atheist. Ooh. I want to abolish religion.
That's very spicy.
But it's also, again, it's so interesting to study. I love studying religion.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful field. But again, Protestantism does not have a theological leg to stand on, in my opinion. But whatever. Moving on. And again, a big thing about the split between Orthodoxy and Catholicism originally was et filius, which was literally a phrase added into the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, visible and invisible, la 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 la. And then there's a portion which is and the Holy Spirit, the third part of the Trinity, right? The most occult one, the Lord, the giver of light, that proceeds from the Father in Orthodoxy, that proceeds from the Father and the Son in Catholicism. That is one of the few theological differences in Catholicism and in Orthodoxy, and it came around relatively lately. This was in direction to Spain. Yeah, it's wonderful that you brought up the Spanish Inquisition, because the Spanish Inquisition was a political answer to the Italian Inquisition. It was a political boom with the Pope. But in Spain was the Visigothic kingdom. The Visigoths that had allied with Rome, sacked Rome, Alaric took his people away. This was, Catalonian fields and the Huns and all that stuff. Play Attila Total War. You'll get it.
Right.
No. It's a great introduction, though. They're all about like the savior. It's really nicely voiced. I can talk video games too, but the Goths, meaning the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, were Arian Christians, not Aryans, Aryan, the fucking the weird Nazi shit, but Arian, Arian, Aryans, followers of Arius, which said that I think they, oh gosh, I forgot. I can't believe I forgot. But the Aryans essentially, I think they rejected the divinity of Jesus. They essentially said he was just a really good dude. He's super a good dude, but was he the son of God? Maybe not, because like he was a really good dude, but it essentially invalidates half of Christian theology, right? But at the same time, they gathered this could be super wrong. There's so many different denominations of heresy or whatever, and I've been reading up on a bunch of them, so that could be super wrong. Essentially, there is a ontological or maybe epistemological difference theologically between mainline Christianity and Arianism. So at one point they sit down and they fucking essentially democratically vote on it during Constantine's times, and they're like, you know what, Arius, your shit's whack, and they essentially beat him, or not him or his followers. Or they essentially just like a bunch of archbishops were like, fuck your shit, we don't like your shit. But the Goths were Arians, and in a way, the Et Filius clause was an addition to the Catholic Creed in order to win over the Spanish Goths that were Arians to Catholicism peacefully. Like, hey, we threw you a bone. It comes from the sun too. So, but it didn't work, by the way. It had to be applied different, but they kept that. And I've had conversations with, again, believing Christians that like, hey, what do you think of Et Filius? And they're like, what? And I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, and they of course have no idea, and So it's again, I'm not going to be all fucking edgy 15-year-old about it. Like, ho, I know God isn't real, but like, I love reading about religion. It's really interesting. There's so much juice hidden in there, and not just that half the popes were horrible people, but like because they're people are people, and some people are terrible, some people are good, but it's for me like? The nitty gritties of the religions is really interesting to me.
What are the people like in Russia?
Oh gosh, really?
Sorry,
that's your question. That's your question.
Not my question. But yeah, what year are we on now? What year are we on now? I'm just trying to drag it back.
Yeah, no, for sure. So Kievska Rus, so Kiev, which is currently located in Ukraine. This is kind of a problem for Russian nationalists because Kiev and Rus, the people are the Rus. So again, this amalgamation of Vikings that have been invited over to rule, because us Russians are so fucking stupid. We can't rule ourselves. So we invite this Viking chieftain to come rule over us. Again, a lot of this stuff is based off of a couple of primary sources. But from these primary sources, you see that most of this guy's bodyguard, essentially, they have names like Sven and Karl and shit like that. These were Norsemen. And essentially you got the Varangian Guard and Byzantium and that sort of stuff, but these guys essentially settle down, and Russian culture at this point is all about living on rivers, because you got the Volga, you got the Dnieper, which is the important one. The Dnieper is what runs through Kiev north to south, and it is a mainline trading post. Yes, we're bringing it back. It is a mainline trading post from the lands of the north, the non-Christian lands, your modern day Scandinavia, essentially. Christianity hasn't reached there yet, or is starting to.
So what year is this?
This is still kind of the 1200s or whatever, like just jumping back a little bit beforehand. So the 800s to the 1200s. This is the main trading artery for these lands in the north to the Middle East. Hence, Kiev is a rich, prosperous city. It's one of the bigger cities in medieval Europe. And even from this day, from the very foundation of Russian culture, economics, whatever, polity, it is an intrinsically European state. It cannot exist by itself. It is a trade hub along the Dnieper. It cannot, already you see this European economy taking shape. you have twin tragedies in the 1200s, 1300s. Constantinople falls. People in Russia see this as a sign of the apocalypse. Rome has fallen. Like it's not like the fall of, well, I guess it kind of is like the fall of Western Rome, because Western Rome falls, Rome itself fell several times, and people thought, holy shit, Constantinople falls. It is the apocalypse. God is coming back. I mean, Rome fell. So huge tumults, and then eventually you have the Mongol conquest. Literal riders of the apocalypse come. Some people don't even resist them. It's hell. It's the apocalypse. Why resist? What, so you have this feudal alliance of people, and it's because they're feudal, facing against an imperial state. The Mongols of Genghis Khan were an imperial state. Naturally, they get fucking steamrolled because you have feudal lords versus an imperial state gets steamrolled. Russia, or again, it's not a nation, but Russian principalities fall under the yoke of the Mongols for 250 years. Which includes slavery. It includes, again, very literal slavery, very literal monetary kind of thing. So again, coinage is falling away, constant raids, everybody's fucking our shit up. So there's movement from rivers to hilltops. Again, this very simple kind of, there's arable land gets fucked up, destroyed. Rivers are no longer a source of trade. These steppe people are coming in and killing all of us. We're moving.
How much of this is influenced by, so you said 250 years, and
Yeah.
again, knowing very little about Russian history ultimately, outside of very modern stuff.
Yeah.
How much of this is being affected by like the Great Famine and the bubonic plague going through Western Europe in
It
like
takes so much longer to get there.
1350?
Well, the Black Plague is existent in Russia through the 17th century.
Okay.
It takes so long to reach it, and it reverberates, but much more slowly. It wasn't nearly as a dramatic thing as in
Right.
France or in England. Again, people are more concentrated. People
But
are
then
living more together.
even then,
But even then, 100%,
like,
it still was a thing. Yeah.
yeah, like the Black Death came to Scandinavia in like 1349. I only know that because there's a racist black metal band called that.
Tight.
But so yeah. So all this is occurring, and there has to be some kind of a ripple. And it's interesting that they're kind of insulated from that in some way.
Well, no, it comes. The first wave, of course, comes, but Russia has, in Russian, it's called chuma. You have chuma. Yeah, chuma operates essentially until the 18th century. And it kind of, you have bubonic plague outbreaks in Europe too, but in Russia, very sensibly so.
We have them in the States. If you go camping out in California, you have squirrel alerts about bubonic plague all the fucking time.
And it's actually really, it's really easily treatable too.
Yeah. It's bacteria, whatever.
Yeah, it's Yersinia pestis. It's the airborne one is you got to watch out for. But Y pestis is pretty easy. Or I'm sorry,
anyway,
Yersinia buba or whatever, bubonicus. Pretty easily treatable. Again, modern medicine, huzzah, until it's not, of course, until antibiotics stop working. But that's my other job.
Right.
I'm also a research scientist in vitro diagnostics. So
it's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well,
but yeah.
You also, I mean, like the third cataclysm, and a lot of this is coming from like I'm really dropping a lot of stuff that I'm supposed to be doing in another podcast, but also in the spirit,
spoiler
like 1400, right? 1400, you have the Little Ice Age kind of beginning as well, and so that has to have. The only reason I'm bringing all this stuff up is because the fact that you're talking about like crop shortages and whatnot that begin to occur during this period. How much of it is affected by those three things?
Anything that affects Europe affects Russia in a far more cataclysmic fashion. Because again, Europe, you got the Gulf Stream, you have good arable lands. Again, look at Bavaria, look at Middle Germany, look at farmlands in southern France. These are amazing, arable, beautiful lands. Russia is past the Gulf Stream. We like to talk about how in the States, because of the Gulf Stream, things are able to be warmer at higher latitudes. Here in Middle America, say along the line of the Midwest where I'm at, that's at the latitude of Florence and Rome. So we're actually
Totally.
far more south than other European polities or whatever. But those European states are, of course, much more warm because of the Gulf Stream. But past the Pripyat marshes, or just farther away from the Gulf Stream, farther away from the water, this goes away. So again,
Right.
any kind of farmland in Russia is anybody that wants to talk about how Russia's the breadbasket or whatever, and for a time it kind of was in the 19th century. But Russia, again, all it takes is one crop failure during essentially the time from the 800s until the 1930s. One crop
Yeah.
failure, and it's cataclysmic, and it happens
And
every
then-
5 or 10 years or so.
Right, and that's only going to get worsened because of the fact that it is all
Population's growing.
so isolated upon rivers, right? And so
Yeah.
if you have that collapse and you have a collapse elsewhere, all of this stuff is going to get compounded because the trade is going to be so affected on both ends, right?
Yeah.
And,
That-
and
I mean,
because there's
you have
no
the-
inland shit that will keep everything afloat.
Oh, 1300s, you have the introduction of crop rotation, which kind of salvages it, but you have this rudimentary
That'll
crop
help, yeah.
rotation from the 1300s taking place in 1888. So
Wow.
this is really, so no chemical fertilizer, none of this. We cannot afford to fuck shit up. We can't afford to run
Yeah.
experiments. We can't. People will die. Hundreds of thousands of people will die. You can't. So again, Stalin catches a lot of shit. Stalin is a monster and was horrible
Right.
and killed millions of people. But
But
but there's a redemption
But
arc here.
there's no redemptions for Stalin. Fully not. The Soviet state was through monstrous losses of people.
right.
Monstrous losses of people by doing experiments, by adding chemical fertilizer, through the mechanization revolution, eventually was brought up. But look what it cost.
Right. Are you bringing up another accelerationist thing here, or?
Well, is it worth it? I'm
No,
not prepared.
I mean,
I'm not prepared to
People
philosophically go there
will
whatsoever.
pick up on the subtext. It's fine.
It's the thing about it is I don't know. In Russia,
Right.
this specific agricultural fucking agronomy was left to fester for so long that it took that much to fucking bring it. Again, was it worth it? I can't answer that question.
Right.
Millions of people died in both instances. I have no idea. And that's, again, one thing I will not, I will share lots of things here with you guys on the podcast. One thing I will not share with you is solutions, because I don't fucking know, guys. I don't fucking know.
Yeah,
I'm not an idealist. I'm
deeply
not
anti-prescriptivist.
I'm not a smart man.
anyway.
Yeah, I am not a smart man. But
Same. We're all dumb
yeah,
here.
it's
okay.
I'm extremely cynical about it. Everyone was wrong. Stalin was wrong. Lenin was wrong. But the czars were also wrong. But Putin's also wrong. It's everyone's wrong. Everyone's really shitty, and people keep dying.
I'm gonna agree with
No
someone
matter
at like
where.
the year 4,500. I'll agree with one person because it'll be a clone of me brought back from the dead, because I cannot possibly die permanently.
Yeah,
It
for
cannot happen. It will never happen. When I die, it's not the end.
That's true. It's
Thank
just
you.
the beginning. Imhotep.
It's just the
Let's get it. Imhotep status. We've reached. That's the mummy
you.
is experiencing a strong meme resurrection, and I'm
Oh,
all
yeah.
for it.
Because it's one of the best
I'm
movies
all
of
in
all
it.
time. It's so good.
I couldn't sleep after I saw it for the first time.
Mike, shut up.
I was 10 years old, and I saw it for the first time, and I didn't realize it was a comedy, and I couldn't sleep because that very
Incredible
night.
movie.
Because that very night there was a strong ass fucking thunderstorm outside,
Yeah.
and I could not sleep. I was horrified. I was a
You
little
couldn't sleep
bitch,
because
and I
it was
couldn't
Imhotep.
because it was Imhotep. That's right. And my parents were laughing at me like this was a funny movie, and I'm like, I'm going to die. This mummy's
The
going
thing
to
that
kill
freaked
me.
me out was the
In-
bugs, the scarabs.
Yeah, it was
That-
everything.
that's what
Everything
fucked me
scared the
up.
shit out of me. I was so scared. My wife still makes fun of me. My parents still make fun of me to this day, and I love the mummy now. It is first of all a
So good.
funny, second qualifier horror movie, but the first
Yeah.
it is a comedy. But
Yeah, it's a
my
horror comedy.
God,
One of the best combinations of
yeah, it
that
was
you could possibly
wonderful.
have. Prosciutto and
it's-
melon,
And it's
horror and comedy.
It was well made too. Like
Incredibly made, yeah.
yeah,
The CGI looks like shit now, but like not as bad as you
it
might
was
expect.
wonderful. Yeah, what a good movie. We should all just
Anyway,
watch The
yeah.
Mummy. Anyway,
What are we talking about today?
Got to go back to Russia eventually.
Egyptology.
You know, I really like The Thing. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, of course. The Thing was wonderful. A masterpiece.
Late 70s,
Um,
best time.
No CGI, but
Exactly. Practical everything. Just like
yeah.
in Russia.
that's why Jurassic Park still holds up. That's why The Thing still holds up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So yeah,
yeah,
going
so
back to
again,
Russia.
agriculture is boring, but at the same time, it kind of enables us to live, and it's a huge part of what's destroying this planet right now. So,
Right.
I mean, I
Right.
guess baby lefties, middle lefties, intelligent lefties, and maybe not even lefties should look into agricultural methods and how to minimize
Yeah.
our impact on this planet
Which,
and
yeah,
shit like that.
fun little thing to pop in there before we continue on. We get back on track, I guess, is when us white dudes came over to what is now the United States of America. We ended up thinking that a lot of these agricultural setups were just chaos. We were like, this is bullshit. You guys are idiots. You make a mound and then it's just random shit planted on it. You're stupid and I hate you. And then we killed all of them, and and we thought we were justified in that. But in fact, what was happening is we weren't justified in that. Weird.
Really?
Right, I know this is news to everyone.
Wow.
But only because of the
but-
agricultural method, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because what they were doing was actually smart, and that's wild. But what it actually was is that they had different types of crops all in the same kind of zoning, I guess, that would rely on like different amounts of moisture, kind of drippage, things like that.
Would
and
they
then
replenish their
would
own
rotate.
soil or whatever? Yeah.
They would
so it's
replenish,
proper
the nitrogen kind of rotation,
fallow
everything
fields
like that.
and all that. Yeah.
Just everything. They just had these crazy mounds that like everything would interact with everything, and then they would
Yeah.
rotate it. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, it's actually just that they're smarter than you are.
Yeah,
So-
just as an example of how awesomely smart Europeans were, the colony of I guess was it a Commonwealth of Virginia, the first couple
Oh.
colonies that showed up, they were so
All
into
starved to death.
planting, they were so into planting tobacco because cash crop,
Yeah.
that they didn't plant food and
Isn't it-
died.
Don't
Yeah.
need it.
which
Re-
is
incredible,
which is my
incredible
favorite
shit.
thing, because that still
Amazing.
happens in
Yeah.
suburbs where everyone has like monoculture lawns, and it's like,
Oh,
why
yeah.
don't you grow like 13 different types of like food in
I
your
wish.
yard and then
I
eat
can't
it?
stand. I'm in a very kind of boomer way. I can't stand mowing the lawn, man.
Then
That
don't
pisses me off.
just plant
It's
just
the
plant
worst.
food.
It's the
Grow
worst. I
corn
wish.
in your front yard.
Corn is incredibly destructive to the soil. I wish they would
It is.
abolish
No, it's
corn.
fucked up. It's
They need
evil.
to abolish
And we
corn.
grow
I can't
so much
stand-
of it.
It is
so much of it.
disgusting. It is.
All
I don't
What's
like
going
eating
on with
corn.
Russia?
No, this is important. Corn sucks. No,
Grow more corn for ethanol, and
Yeah.
fuck you up twice. Yeah, sorry. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
So you have movement from riverbeds to mountain beds. Moscow becomes important because it is this new kind of center of essentially tax collection for Mongols. So yes, I'm originally
Right,
from Moscow,
right.
and we started off as rats. We would rat on our fellow fucking
Oh,
principalities,
that kind of rat.
collect up the slaves, send them down to the Mongols. So yeah, hence
Aw.
we accumulated financial power, became powerful, and started lording it over the other principalities. Go figure, right? Slave economy.
What do you call
Capitalism.
people from
Good
Moscow?
shit.
Like, genuine
Muscovites.
question.
Well,
Muscovites?
in
That's
English,
awesome.
it's Muscovites.
Okay, Muscovites. I didn't know
Oh my
that.
god, I'm totally blanking on my Russian right now. It's a part of beauties of bilingualism. Is Moskvichi.
So
In Russian, it's
interesting.
Moskvichi.
Okay.
People from
So
Moscow.
what you're saying is that, like, yeah, there were black slaves, but really the first slaves were Muscovites.
Well, the
and
first
the
slaves
Irish,
were
and the Irish.
everyone was slaves, man.
Yeah.
We're gonna get into Russian
Sorry,
serfdom. We're gonna get into Russian
Yeah.
serfdom and about how they
Okay.
were literal slaves, but also they were not literal slaves. This is
Because they were
it's this-
serfs.
they were serfs, but serfdom in Russia was different than
Interesting.
serfdom
Okay.
in
I'm gonna shut up
Western
for a while.
Europe. No. Serfdom in Russia is one of these interesting things because, well, again, see if you kind of can follow along with me here, if you're a scholar of the American South. But serfdom actually became worse as time went on, became more like slavery. Are we picking
Okay.
anything up? Any connections here? Because slavery in America also did not. How do I phrase this correctly in order
slavery-
to not sound
slavery in
horrible? Slavery
America-
in
Yeah.
America actually got
It-
worse for
it-
the
it-
slaves
yeah,
as time went
Right.
It-
Right.
it
That's what I
started
meant.
out
we started
mostly
like
as like an
seasoning slaves and stuff.
They
Yeah.
were
Well-
100% still slaves at the beginning, but at the end, it was much, much worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
at
I
the,
mean,
at
well,
the beginning,
like,
slavery was more like an indentured servitude sort of arrangement, and then it moved into like full chattel
so that was
slavery.
until group of black and white slaves escaped and then they sentenced. I think I lost you guys. Can you
Hello.
No,
okay.
I see
We're
you.
listening. Yeah.
You
No,
kind of blipped a little bit. But
is this
Yeah,
the
no,
1811 Louisiana thing?
Yeah, no, I remember that there was like a acceleration of chattel slavery after I think 2 or 3 black serfs, or it was maybe it was 1 black serf and then a group of white serfs escaped and were captured, and the black serfs were sentenced to chattel slavery, permanent slavery.
Yeah.
And then
So then that would have been earlier on in probably
permanent
Virginia then.
started coming to America.
And then
Oh,
you also
Jesus.
have, because slaves are treated as product, you also have an acceleration in that kind of regard. Like one of the facts that always terrifies me, and I mentioned it just a moment ago, but is the seasoning of slaves. If you guys are familiar with this terminology, which is there are a lot of tropical diseases in the South, and to make sure that slaves could manage in those conditions, they moved a lot of them, well, and for a lot of different reasons, moved a lot of them into the Caribbean to deal with worse tropical conditions, see which ones of them lived, and then move them into the South. And
Jesus
so
Christ.
that's just one example of many different kind of ways of making the system more brutal so that you can produce better product through eugenics, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's not
Isn't
the goal
the
isn't
last,
brutality, the goal is
white-controlled,
efficiency, right?
yeah. What was that, John?
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Isn't the last controlled, or maybe Brazil isn't a seasoning colony, but all the slave seasoning colonies, they killed all the white people eventually, right?
I mean,
Some of them
Haiti did pretty
some did
well.
not.
Yeah.
Haiti did pretty well with
Haiti
that.
was-
That's kind of the
we can talk-
basis there.
Toussaint Louverture.
We can talk
So-
about Haiti. Yeah, I loved
Yeah.
your guys'. I
No,
loved your guys' episode on Haiti, and I wish
Well,
I could.
cheers. Yeah.
Well,
I
thanks,
wish I
I'm
could have
glad.
live tweeted it because there's so much cool Napoleonic shit that we can talk
Yeah.
about then, and
Yeah.
how the National Convention
Well, there's so much more to it.
was
It's insane.
how it drove the liberation of slaves in the nascent French Republic, and how for a time the nascent
Right.
French Republic was actually all about freeing slaves, and how
Yep.
delegates from the National Convention came over to Haiti and confirmed the fact that, hey, slaves are free. And then of course, naturally, some rich motherfuckers got together and were like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then of course,
And-
eventually the National Convention is subsumed, and you have the bourgeois capitalist fucking engine takes its thing, and eventually Napoleon's like, hey, slavery's totally chill now.
Right. And
So-
that the only real reason, I don't think we covered this on the pod, but for some reason, I don't know why, I forget most of the podcasts that we do. But
bless.
yeah. But the thing that really ends up leading to the success of the Haitian Revolution is the fact that they more or less become a proxy war between the French and the Spaniards, and
English.
end up English.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
French
there's the reason the French raid.
My memory's fucked up. Okay.
Well,
It's the
to send
English?
troops in there. Well, maybe at some point, perhaps. Did we just lose? No, we did not lose.
we're
you.
all here.
You still
I
have your
think we're
hands up. Okay.
No, I'm just shocked by my misremembering.
No, it's fine. I'm sure because obviously you have the
Excuse me.
Dominican Republic, or the island of Hispaniola, so it is in fact half Spanish, half French.
Right.
But at the time, Napoleon was
Well,
able to address the revolt.
No, it is.
because there was a lull in the British and French fighting. He sent a force of 20,000 under the aptly named General Rochambeau. We all love this guy. We all
That
love
was
the
pretty
name.
good.
And he, again, horrible, brutal, murdered
Right.
people, whatever. 20,000 dead Frenchmen of malaria. Obviously, then they send Frenchmen from Europe to a tropical country. All of
Right.
them fucking die of malaria.
What-
They get there,
right.
they get dunked on, and eventually they have to get rescued by British ships.
What I'm talking about with
afterwards-
the
yeah,
with the
go ahead.
French and the Spanish is that the Spanish in the Dominican Republic are saying, if you fight the French, we will free you, and the French are saying, if you fight the Spanish, we'll free you. Like the one was saying, we will take this space over.
I
and
am
we'll
not
give
prepared
you
to
your-
answer yes or no to this because I guess I have not done my research.
I
enough, and will get
need
back
to
you.
look back on this.
Yeah.
We
There's a
will all get
wonderful-
back to the listener and
there's
let
a
us know which
wonderful
one of us is
podcast.
misremembering in a weird way.
There's a wonderful
Sorry.
podcast called Revolutions by some guy who did the history of Rome. Again, I super recommend that podcast too. But yeah, he does a podcast called Revolutions, which is just about revolutions. It has a super capitalist
Nice.
spin on it, but through his not a capitalist, but he has an American spin on it. But through his American talk, capitalists and whatever, they all tell on themselves in the end. And it's just through it, you get these little glimpses of, oh, he didn't mean to say this, but what really happened was. So it's just, yeah. I guess maybe I'm just reading too much into it. It's hard to. I try not to presuppose, but motherfuckers just be telling on themselves sometimes. Like, yeah. So the Haitian Revolution is incredible because immediately everyone starts fucking with the country, and it is certainly not because of Haiti that Haiti is currently in a horrible fucking state. It is a concerted effort by.
Yeah. And we have all made it so much worse.
Sorry.
No, it's definitely not your fault. I mean,
I could speak about.
I have done a lot of this.
I could extend World War II to a 10-episode podcast and not be done talking.
Oh yeah.
But
what year are we on?
Oh God.
1400.
Let's say let's
we were just talking about.
Right, they've been here for too long.
The
Mongols have been here.
250
The
years.
Mongols have been here too long. It's time to kick them out. Obviously, the Mongol Empire undergoes its own transition, and transitionary state loses its grasp on a variety of locations. You have successor states. The most
and the Russia was really capitalizing on the fact that the Mongol Empire had so much infighting at the time.
Yeah.
And they really just like were not even focused on Russia at this point because of how much.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So you had the Golden Horde, which was a successor state to the Mongol Empire, or maybe that came later. Again, this is a variety.
No. This is checking out with my memory of. I did a little bit of research before I went into this as well. So
yeah. So I think the most solid successor state to the Mongol Empire is Ming China, or whatever empire became the current ruling dynasty, and they held on for quite a while until Qing. And this, of course, that's the empire that Marco Polo goes and visits. Those are Mongol rulers or Manchu rulers, essentially.
Right.
So Mongol successors. But so eventually, Russia overthrows at the head of this Grand Principality of Moscow that, through titanic efforts, tries to unite some people, but there's still some Russian princes that fight against Moscow. So it's still this big feudal bent. But eventually at the Battle of Kulikovo Field, again, this titanic fight, Russia wins, or Moscow wins. Again, Russia is not a thing. The Muscovite Principality wins, throws off the Mongol yoke, 250 years. There's a huge kind of thing in Russian nationalism, like, well, black folks like to say that they were enslaved. We were enslaved for 50 years, but we don't complain. Look at Mongolia now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think Russia's kind of past Mongolia. So that's why we don't get to fucking complain about, it's dynamics of power. That's important.
Great basketball teams in Mongolia.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Mongolia is really cool.
Well,
like,
that sounded like a racist joke. It's not. They love basketball. They genuinely
do. Yeah.
That's
not racist.
There's a series on Netflix about like national sports, and I think it's in Kyrgyzstan where they play like polo with a dead goat, and it's awesome.
Hell yeah!
It's the coolest shit ever. Like these are straight up steppe nomads, and they're just
everyone's
all that.
cooler
It's
than
awesome.
me.
Teddy, did you ever go to Kyrgyzstan?
No, I've never been outside European Russia.
So
in terms of within Russia,
when I deployed during Operation Enduring Freedom.
Iraqi Freedom.
No, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan. Yeah. Different illegal war.
You'll always have that over me. I never got to do that fun stuff.
It's not something I hold over people, but you stop in Kyrgyzstan on the way to Afghanistan.
Right.
And Kyrgyzstan is very odd because it's got a huge amount of Russian influence. And then also there's a very Asian influence as well. I would guess Mongolian is probably where that influence comes from.
Well, they're all Turkic people. Like it just ethnically, there's a bunch of Turkic people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's very, very interesting. There's like a bunch of like old Soviet like memorabilia there, and then like also like Mongolian memorabilia stuff, like
and Milky Way bars.
Yeah.
Old like Soviet successor states for some reason love like all the chocolate bars that they don't like in the States. I think there's a reason for that. So Russia's all about like Mars bars and like Milky Way. I remember in the 90s, my grandma got a side hustle and she was selling these fucking newly available American chocolate. Of course,
Ooh.
we're in Europe. We grew up with actual chocolate, and yet people couldn't get, so this stuff is obviously chemical trash, but
Hell yeah.
people couldn't get enough of it because it's new, oh, give me this new shit. And yeah, so my grandma kind of had a side hustle because, hey, we don't have heavy industry anymore. More on that later. But
So yeah, back
yeah,
to
just
expelling
reality.
the Mongols.
Yeah, so Mongols are gone. We have to build kind of a polity, but Russia's by no means unified. It takes centuries up until Ivan the Terrible. You guys are familiar with Ivan the Terrible, right? But it wasn't just him. It's Ivan the First, Second, and Third. He's Ivan the Fourth. So that's essentially the equivalent of John. It's a pretty common name. So Ivan the Fourth and his
Different John.
granddad and whatever, all that's, again, there's a bunch of history here that I'm not really up on. I used to be up on a lot, but with the conquering of Muslim Tatar, we call them Tatars, but it's really Mongolian Turkic people. With the conquering of the Kazan province, we finally expel most of Mongolian influence. And Ivan the Terrible declares himself the Tsar, which is Caesar. He decides to become an emperor. And I guess, again, it's called the Tsar. And on my Napoleonic forums, I always fight the fucking fight with people because it's etymology and I like to nitpick. And people are like, well, when the Tsar decided to do this, I'm like, it's the 1800s. Russia is an empire ruled by an emperor. He was addressed as an emperor. He was not called the Tsar. That's my little pet peeve, but again, it shows, again, violently autistic. I am violently autistic about this shit. So, and obviously, God bless all the listeners that are, because
we love them.
Yes,
those are my favorite listeners, which is the only reason I listen to your stupid complaints in my DMs.
I'm so stupid. I complain so
much. Fucking idiots! I hate you. Just kidding.
I love it.
My favorites.
This has become very antagonistic.
Someone's got to fucking listen to me. My family sure doesn't. But
my daughter won't listen to me.
God bless her. She's so normal. I love her so much.
That is nice. That is good. Normal daughter.
She's the only kind of blessing of normalcy I have in my life. But yeah, back to the autism.
Yes.
So he declares himself Tsar.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people like to think, even in Russia, even people close to the matter, like to think that it was Peter that modernized Russia. People that know anything. Yes, people that know anything at all about Russia know about Peter the Great and how before Peter, it was just all long beards and dumb Russian hats and all this. And after Peter, it was all westernized everything and things are better. And again, it was a process. Go ahead.
Can I share my favorite Peter the Great fact as an argument for why he probably wasn't the guy to modernize things entirely?
Go ahead. There's again, a very powerful personality. He was one of the tallest men of his age.
Yeah, extremely tall.
Both good and bad. He did some awful shit. Yeah. And he actually did some really smart shit. Go.
He tortured his own son to death, and as he was torturing him to death, apparently he was sobbing and screaming, "Why are you making me do this to you? Why are you making me do this to you?"
Good stuff.
And so I am skeptical about him being a massively progressive or the primary progressive force.
Well,
for Russia.
his older sister tried to murder him and his brother.
Right.
So there was a family dynamic there, and of course, there's a very famous.
Kill your son. Don't be weird about it. Just do it.
Was it his sister or his aunt? I thought his aunt tried to kill him.
Sophia, Sophia was a sister, wasn't she?
No.
Now you're making me question myself.
I only know the son thing and that he was very tall and he has a very good painting of him on a bridge. That's all. That's what I know.
I am unfamiliar with this painting. I'm familiar with him.
I may have invented it in a dream.
There is a wonderful painting of Peter the Great during the sack of Narva.
Yeah.
It's just Russian soldiers just going to town on the Swedes.
Beautiful.
I need to.
I'm not even imagining a wartime thing. I'm just imagining them just fucking a bunch of Swedes. Just love.
Yeah.
So Peter the Great.
Yes, the Siege of Narva, 1704. This picture is hilarious because Peter's on horseback and Russian soldiers are just like going to town. It's lovely, but it's horrible. But yeah,
Beautiful. Oh yeah.
But we've really
what a tall, handsome gentleman.
Yeah, he was.
Sorry, go on.
He was really kind of low humor. He, cutting people's beards off for fun, but fun things included like, just eating the most, seeing who could vomit the farthest, that sort of stuff. Pretty typical.
Oh, I've done that.
Pretty typical monarch shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But lives are on the line always. So if they made I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Hulu show The Great, and they show how it's stupid and accurate, of course, but they say how the Russian courts no, Peter the Great was like that. Catherine the Great was shitty in a different way, but they show her as this, of course, she's strong, powerful woman, and da 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 da. She was one of the most absolute monarchs, and the serfs were oppressed worse under her than anybody else. So despite the fact that she was a German, so she's supposed to be this Enlightenment monarch or whatever. She allowed the worst fucking things to happen under her rule. But before we get to Peter the Great, we have to digress to the time of troubles, which is this big interregnum between the descendants of Rurik and the Romanovs. And this is an incredibly important time in Russian history because it informs what happens during the rest of the 18th century and even during the Napoleonic Wars. Because as we remember in our traditionalist philosophy, time is not a line, time is a circle. And what was there before will come again. And great-grandpa, who's lying right there, who's living in our house, he's lying right there next to the fireplace. He was there for the time of troubles, and he can tell you about it. We can't read, but he was there, and he can tell you about it. And it's a very, very real.
What period were the troubles?
Early 1600s, late 1500s, early 1600s.
Okay.
So this is the time when the Commonwealth, Rечь Посполита, the Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania, is at the height of its power. So that's where the Russians hate the Poles, and it's partially because of this, because the Poles were powerful, and were shitting.
They keep on sending all those.
They were shitting on us at the time.
Sun at night.
Yeah.
Screen door submarines.
Yeah, so this goes back to again, Poles are Catholic, we're Orthodox. The Poles are a little bit democratic in their way. Russians are absolute. There's a clash of cultures, clash of everything. They're Slavs, but they're desperately wanting to be seen as Europeans. So I'm not an expert. I never claim to be, but in a folklore sense, a lot of this stuff happens. The Poles come in and ransack our shit for a long time. Eventually, we beat them. Eventually, we sit a minor nobleman, boyar, on the throne. I think his name was Mikhail. I don't remember if it was Mikhail Alexeyevich or Mikhail, whatever. It's the first Romanov, Mikhail the First, I think. Michael, essentially, and he and his son start the modernization, the introduction of westernized regiments in the army, the hiring of German masters to start making artillery, and of course Ivan the Great had artillery. Before them, artillery and Western troops, and again, Russians are not fucking peasants with pitchforks. We have guns, we have cannons, we have sophisticated armor making techniques. We're right into Klim Zhukov's wheelhouse right here, by the way. This is stuff he can talk about. So again, Russia has a competent military since before the Mongols were kicked out, but now we really start to shine, and it comes to bear against the Polish, who again have the best cavalry in the world at this time, and eventually they're defeated. And then we continue to clash with the Poles for the rest of the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Yeah, we kind of carve out our little space. And Peter, just like Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great, did not create the Macedonian army and go and conquer the fucking world with it. His dad did that. His dad created the army, so Alexander was able to go conquer the world with it. The same thing was with Peter. His father, Alexei Mikhailovich, Alexei, my dad's name actually, created this westernized army, regiments of Western formation. He created the Germanic Quarter, the German Quarter in Moscow. It's a whole neighborhood full of immigrants, essentially. Super lucrative contracts. Hey, come over here, teach us how to do shit. We'll pay you by the bucket load. You can practice your weird Protestant shit over here. It's chill.
Were these
chill.
the Germans that would become known as the Volga Germans, or is that a different group of
I'm sure
Germans?
it could be part of that at the one, but yes, the Volga Germans, yes, the colonization of the Volga occurred possibly at this point. At one point, they transferred the inhabitants of Veliki Novgorod to Nizhny Novgorod, or Lower Novgorod on the Volga. There's 2 cities in Russia called Novgorod, and one of them, Veliki Novgorod, was conquered by the Muscovite principality because Novgorod was an extremely rich Hanseatic trading republic. They had a prince, but it was really the Veche, or this kind of pseudo democracy, that kind of ruled. So they had this kind of like mercantile republic thing going on, and there's this whole other digression we could do with Alexander Nevsky and the Livonian Order and the Teutons and the Danish and the Swedes and all that shit. There's a lot of history up there by modern Estonia and modern, former Ingria and all that stuff. So the Baltic, again, why Russians see the Baltics as theirs, because we have a lot of history there. But again, there's national self-determination and all that stuff, and again, I do not agree with this. I do not agree with this. I'm just giving examples of why some people might think the way they do. Again, people aren't stupid. They have historical bases to base stuff off of, even if they're terrible ideas. But so Peter the Great inherits this ready-made thing, the Streltsy, which is essentially a settled kind of warrior class, not quite nobles, but essentially a warrior caste. Gets riled up by his sister, he puts him down, and at that point, he's far more absolute. He immediately starts to try to conquer land down south from the Crimean Tatars. That's how you have Crimea. He is unsuccessful. He gets his fucking ass kicked down there. He conquers the town of Azov. He's kicked out of there. He has to cede it again. Again, tens of thousands of lives lost. No go. So he has to go north. And north is this incredibly powerful empire of Sweden. Sweden at the I don't know if they were at the peak of their power, but somewhere close to it. Again, Sweden gets its imperial chops during the 30 Years' War. Gustavus Adolphus, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with it. This great Protestant power kind of rescued the Protestant League during the 30 Years' War, along with French help. France loves to be fighting against other Catholic powers at this time, because France is stuck between 2 sets of Habsburgs, the ones in Austria and the ones in Spain. So they don't like that. So they do their own kind of thing to, again, balance power. Nobody really cares about religion. It's all about balance of power.
Right.
So
just as a random fun fact, you know how many fucking people died in the 30 Years' War?
I think it wasn't matched by casualties until World War I.
It was 8 million. Yeah.
It was mostly from starvation, as usual. It was mostly from starvation, and it was mostly in this weird kind of trough or narrow strip of land in like the Palatinate and Württemberg and all that, like south central Germany.
Right.
It was. Yeah, I'm reading a book about that too.
It culminated in something far worse, actually, in Hobbes writing Leviathan.
Well, what it ended up coming up with is the concept of statehood, or being a state. So this is before a nation. This is the whole.
Really accidentally the joke I made, and I'm going to take credit for it. Thank you.
No, I like it. Because Hobbes is part of it, but of course Westphalia is where they determined that, hey, these aren't personal properties of the counts and kings, but rather these polities that have people in them, and you can't really subdivide them or whatever, because people get real mad. And religion's a separate issue, but again, we're kind of devolving. And again, you guys were talking about last time about how mercenaries are becoming a thing again, and how we used to have mercenaries in check because we have these really strong states that are able to maintain control of mercenaries, but how we're devolving again. Yeah, we're devolving back into the 30 Years' War, where mercenaries with absolutely no fealty to lord or land, and literally just, oh, you guys will pay better, chill, let's go over to the other side, no worries.
Three-year contract.
Yep.
Right.
Wonderful stuff. And the parallels draw themselves. And again, the whole Marx is wonderful here in that the first time it's a tragedy, the second time it's a farce, but I'm sure he forgets to add that even the farce can be tragic. So the farce, I think, is more tragic. But he was, of course, talking about Napoleon I, Napoleon III. But and Napoleon I, of course, killed what is it, 3 or 4 million people died directly or indirectly because of Napoleon the First.
Right.
But Napoleon the Third was just a shitheel.
Yeah, he was just super incompetent.
And he was terrible. Yeah, he did win Italy as independence though. So,
By the way, Teddy,
what's up, man?
I was wrong and you were right for the listener. It was his sister who tried to kill him.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, man. If I don't have that down, then what business do I have being on this podcast?
Yeah, our Ruski guy got the Ruski thing right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I
She
did not mean to cast doubt on you.
No, you're good, dude. I just yeah, she lucked out actually. She got to spend the rest of her life in a Orthodox monastery. She got to live. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Dude,
Didn't
I
happen
love
often.
that.
She conspired to kill him, and she got to live, which was remarkable.
Guys, if any of you want to send me to a monastery, I'll do it. Just send me. I'm done.
Was this portrait her punishment? Like
she was a beautiful looking woman. I don't see it.
Oh
Is
yeah,
there a
no.
thing?
Yeah,
Well, like-
Teddy's
like,
not
there's-
watching
it's
the
like-
feed,
there's
but
this,
yeah.
like,
Yeah, I'm not seeing the
expression.
feed, but I've
Oh.
seen her portrait before, and she's a
Yeah.
she's a thick girl. I love it. But yeah,
But I mean,
she's
like just like how angry her expression is.
yeah. Well,
she,
of
she
course,
doesn't look like a happy
this
person.
Like,
portrait
this
was
is like
drawn.
this is like the
We-
only image I've
This
ever seen
portrait
of her.
was drawn
And she
after.
does look like the villain.
We
This
stand
portrait was drawn
the
after. though,
ugly
so,
Russian
I
thickies.
guess,
yeah. Again, understand. Even art is political. This was drawn
Yeah,
probably
yes.
after her time.
Especially art is political.
So naturally, hello, this was this horrible sister to our great ruler. We need to
Yeah.
draw her as such. But I'm sure there's got to be modern art or contemporary art of her somewhere. There's always a lithograph hiding somewhere. But yeah,
It's a good motto.
there's always a
There's-
lithograph somewhere,
right.
guys. It's
Yeah.
it's believe.
It's like there's always money in the banana stand.
Yeah,
There's always a lithograph
literally.
somewhere.
yeah. But again, I'm skipping so much. I'm realizing I've skipped so much shit, but we're just gonna plow ahead. And let
I
me
mean,
know
do
if
we
you want to.
need to
If you
do
want
a
to, if you
second
want to.
episode?
Yeah, no,
I don't know
I
because
think,
I wouldn't remember where to pick up from. You guys would have to steer me again. But
well, yeah,
obviously
but
the
we've got a
depth
recording
content
of it,
is.
so we can
Oh,
figure
is that
out
right?
where
Is
we
that what we're
left
doing here?
that is what
okay.
we're doing. Yeah,
Wait, we record this?
we do record this.
Whoops. I'd like
Oh
to
god,
take
I
back.
would not have said any of that. Yeah.
I'd like to take back so much. No. Yeah, unfortunately, the breadth of material is only going to get thicker and thicker.
Yeah.
Like double C, thicker and
Weird
thicker. But
how
I think,
history does that.
because
I
I could
think-
spend hours talking about just the Napoleonic Wars.
I think
Yeah.
I
Napoleon's
think
invasion of Russia is such an incredible seminal moment for what is essentially manufacturing nationalism. There was no nationalism. Or if there was, it was not what we would consider national. Again, I could
Right.
get my fucking head ripped off for saying this because so many different kinds of governments and people and groups, whatever. Again, my brain's not working because I'm trying to translate Russian in my head as I'm talking in English. Have made it their political goal to say that, hey, this was an act of first Russian nobles rallying the peasantry to support a monarchist regime. And 50 years later, it was a triumph of what a country can do when it unites behind an existing will of all the classes working together. And 50 years from that is it was only the peasants, despite the interference from the nobles in their proletarian ways, that were able to throw off the yoke of the capitalist invaders. And now it is only because they were ethnic Russians that they were able to defeat the inferior French.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like this narrative goes on, but none of it is right. The closest ones, of course, as always, are the primary sources wherein people talk about why people actually fought and why it was, and it's delving through historiography is an incredibly important thing nowadays, and it's a developing wildly important field, and it is through this is something I can actually say I have read myself. A variety, because Napoleonic Wars is my fucking thing. I'm so sorry I keep interrupting. I'll finish, I promise I soon.
No.
But just to finish this thought here is the historiography of it is super important, but it is getting to the primary sources and getting to what actually happened. And I remember this being a 5-year-old looking at postcards, because in the Soviet Union, they made postcards of the 1812 war, and they had little grenadiers and soldiers and shit. And at that age, I was like, yes, this is what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be that
Right.
dude in those fucking super tight pants. But
I want my
it's
ass to look like that.
yeah, oh my God, so hot. But like, this is only it's an interest I've had in forever, but like only within the last year or so, quarantine has awakened something in me, and I've started to really dig into scholarly shit regarding this incredibly pivotal. It's called the Patriotic War in Russia, and World War II is called the Great Patriotic War. And it's this duality, this connection, the fact that the Great Patriotic War is this spiritual successor to this very similar kind of kicking out the invaders, but at the same time, it's nothing at all like that. It is nothing like that whatsoever. And there's so many different ways you can approach this. And at the same time, reading through Western historiography, it totally exists, has this blank spot in that for 80 years, Russian archives were completely not accessible. So you have these branches of historiography that have formed completely independent of one another. Long story short, it's an incredible topic. I love talking about it, and we can talk about that for a long time.
And I got two little things to kind of just respond and build off to with that, but they're small and probably not worth responding to because I'm stupid. No one likes
I will respond everything. Go. I will answer everything in order.
Number one, COVID definitely turned half of us into scholars and half of us into fucking idiots. It's either or. I don't think that there's an in between there.
I did
It unabashedly, 100% unapologetically radicalized me. I was a lukewarm fucking liberal until 2020. Right. Full stop.
Yes. And the second part is, and Christopher Hedges says a lot about this, and it's really important that you brought it up, but that in these revolutionary moments, we always end up romanticizing them as being like, there was an upwelling of the impoverished classes that ended up causing this kind of change, when for the good or for the bad, that's not necessarily how it occurs. You always end up needing some amount of defecting people from the ruling class in order to make anything like this work.
And that's exactly what happened. Yep.
Exactly. And so every time anything effective happens, there's always some agreement from the ruling class, and that is always necessary. So, keeping that in mind, kids. So my notes as we leave this, which I sense is what's happening here, but is look up the Treaty of Westphalia and how young states are. And consider how important it is to bringing the ruling class in to ally with the people. And not that I'm trying to tell you to do anything weird. Just read those things.
No, go fucking nuts, guys. Go nuts. Read this shit. I will provide sources in English and Russian.
Please.
That is not a problem for me.
Yeah.
I just needs to be. You need to direct my anger at exactly what you want, because otherwise I'll drop a list of 200 books on you, and y'all don't want that.
I'm down with it.
But if you guys want to do it, I have a couple very final closing points to make, but of course they're not.
Yeah,
they're not.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you guys, please, Mike and John, if you guys have anything to. Not that we're closing out the episode. I'm running this podcast now, motherfuckers. No,
you're the daddy now.
I got my finger on the stop record button. So
if you have any thoughts right now before I kind of close my bit, and then I'm sure you guys can have your
go ahead. Go ahead and close your bit, and we'll
my
go from there.
Kind of closing points is, I think I've already made my first point. Is people weren't stupid. This will continue to be a thread throughout. People were ignorant, but they were not stupid.
Yes.
You will see this specifically within revolutions. You do need that ruling class kind of thing, but very oftentimes you have these self-organized things, and they are, the Russian word is stihine, which means as if, I'm really bad at translating on the fly, but as if a natural disaster, as if by will of nature, something starts to occur. And it's something that can't, yes, it just cataclysmic implies more negative, but it just means as if with a will of its own, like a will of nature, things start to coalesce. Sometimes it's just time. The French Revolution is a wonderful example of this. The Russian Revolution is a wonderful example of things just happen at a point. And it doesn't have to be the specific point. It could have been, this point could have been prevented. the whole alternative history people like to say, can you have done something to prevent nothing could have prevented the Russian Revolution. Nothing. Except the complete solution of the agrarian question. And that couldn't have happened because the nobility would have lost its shit. Otherwise, there would have been a government, there would have been a revolution from the right. So essentially, if one thing didn't cause it, another thing would have. If this thing didn't cause it, something else would have. The same thing with the French Revolution. So yeah.
I think the term ultimately, catastrophism, right? Isn't that the theory of history where sudden occurrences cause a massive change?
Yes, but they're never sudden. They're never sudden once you analyze them. There are centuries. There are centuries of direct and indirect causalities that lead into this shit.
My thesis's subtitle is process catastrophism and inhuman economy, and it's supposed to be kind of a joke about how catastrophism is always part of a process or processes. And so
I don't even have a master's, man.
Yeah,
I barely know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so catastrophism. Yeah. Sorry, I said cataclysm. I meant
you good, man.
Yeah.
John, did you have something, man?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say that about catastrophism, that neolibs are going to be shocked about the catastrophe of when they're being eaten alive in the streets.
Yeah, and they'll be like, how could we have prevented this? How could this happen?
All of a sudden in the last 20 hours, everybody got super mad at us.
Wow.
Really hungry.
and we did so good. Yeah, no, this is, and it's sad because in reality.
Yeah. Great man theory gets really weird when recycling doesn't stop you from being eaten by the proletariat.
Well, again, I'm not. There's people that are like, oh, I think that great man has a part to play, no matter how small, because Napoleon is Napoleon. Yeah. You can't discount Napoleon.
Yeah.
So
some
again,
so
there's always but he was not short. But
no, he wasn't.
He was above. He was above average
because
height, actually.
The French and English foot were different lengths.
Yeah, he was above average height, and the French were on average actually taller than Russians. So French were taller than Russians, and he was one of the tallest French. Usually he's portrayed next to his grenadiers, which wore bear hats, and they had height requirements of 6 feet. So naturally he's going to look shorter next to his grenadiers. So
those are big boys.
There were some big old boys.
Is that where the term bear comes from, or?
Yeah,
I imagine it comes from
deer.
I'm sure it comes from the proper bear, not from the.
Oh, like the animal?
Oh, I don't know.
I was looking for some kind of historical gay,
hairy, burly gay man. That's weird.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah, no, I'm too fat to be a bear, but it's maybe someday if I work real hard.
What is okay? So like a lightweight bear is a wolf. A lighter weight wolf is an otter. What's a heavy bear?
I feel like we're getting into the phrenology of gay communities.
An elephant?
Yeah,
I think you can be as heavy as you want to be a bear, man.
In terms of hair, I think we're gonna have to go like mastodon. That's just big, thickums. And mastodons and mammoths are native to Russia. Fun science fact.
You guys heard it here first.
Yeah.
Teddy K is not just a bear; he's a furry, big old mastodon.
Big old boy. But yeah, I'm sure I had another point to make, but this is as good a time to end as any. This is always going to be open ended. I will always miss shit, and hopefully your audience engages and calls me out for the piece of shit that I am, because that will lead to audience engagement, and God bless. So I love it.
And we need to have you on as soon as possible again to finish this.
Well, we'll schedule something. No, next week we got other things we need to cover.
Fuck.
More recent sort of stuff.
Yeah. No, we can talk current affairs, but
politics isn't real.
It takes.
We'll have you on again.
We can talk about Aristotle. Yeah.
So to wrap this episode up, on the subject of listener engagement, while there was some ranting going back and forth, it dawned on me that we haven't checked the Benzo Rehab questions email.
Oh no!
And there's a couple of questions in there. I reached out to the people who sent them, and we will be answering those questions on the next podcast.
Oh damn it! We can't do it now.
No, they're
long.
Do it. They're long.
Just roll it out.
They're long.
Let's roll it out.
Are you gonna send them to me? Because
I'll send them to you later.
Okay.
So we'll answer those questions on the next podcast.
Cool.
I want to do some more current event stuff on the next episode.
Yeah.
And then we've got some other guests that we're kind of. I actually may have another Russian guest that might be able to join us at some point.
I refuse. Is it Cyril?
No, it's not. No.
Damn it.
Different
Okay, I would
Russian.
have said yes then.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, no, this was a great discussion, a lot of tangents, but I think it's important, and you know, the history of a place like Russia is obviously tied into the world in general.
There you go. That was my second point. I'm so sorry.
No,
Russia.
great. I'm
a
glad
lot
I
of
brought
people
it
like
up for
to
you.
say like Russia is Dugin specifically. When we get into him, he's going to be like Russia is a Eurasian thing. No, Russia's always been, since its very conception, a European entity. That's all I have
Look,
to say.
there are water people and there are land people, okay? And it's a Dugan only joke.
Well,
All right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
Have you
I
actually
mean,
have you actually read the Foundations of Geopolitics?
No,
the,
I mean, there's no like
fourth
good
political theory?
English translations of his work, so I've
Which
just
is odd
listened to him
considering
talk.
he speaks English. Yeah, but
Yeah.
we'll
I
get
mean,
into
I
that.
haven't found it. I might be an idiot, and someone's going to correct me on that, which please do. But like, I just
I can
during my
barely
cursory
decipher the
looks.
shit. I speed read scholarly fucking works,
Yeah.
and then I look at your homework from Truncata, and I'm like, this is gonna take me 30 minutes to read.
You're welcome.
Just
I love you.
your fucking homework. God bless you.
By the way,
right.
yeah. Let me know what I can do pitches.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're good to wrap it up here. We're ending on, I guess, the end of Peter the Great in Russian history.
Yep. There you go.
We'll pick it up from there sometime in the near future. I'll talk to Teddy and the boys offline to figure all that scheduling out, so we're not doing it on the recording.
Whatever, they want to hear it. They want to see behind the curtain.
Yeah, no, you don't want to see behind the curtain. I swear to God, not behind the curtain.
Oh no!
It's just me doggy dragging my ass on the
there's
carpet.
just balls back there. Okay.
Yeah. Nothing but a wall of dildos. So yeah, Danko, you got any pitches?
I do. I have many. I have multiple. First off, I already mentioned it. Please go follow Bringing Down the Grindhouse on Instagram. It's BTGH Podcast, I believe.
Yes.
I am doing
Bringing Down the Grindhouse _podcast.
Yeah, whatever. It's words. I don't know words and letters and shit, man. I studied English. But yeah, so follow them. Instead of doing one episode on the history of the witch trials, we are doing 3 probably.
Okay.
So it's going to be like the bizarro version of this. We're going to cover a lot of the political stuff that we talked about here, but on the Western European end of it. And then the American end of it when we come into like the 1600s. So a lot of really fun stuff to cover there. Also a lot of feminism, a lot of like Marxian economics, a lot of everything, anarchism. Just it's going to be a nightmare and it's going to be great. And these people are not prepared for it. So follow them. They also love to get into like, horror movies and stuff. That's what their podcast is about. And they've been posting a lot about some stuff that I love. So props to them. Also, next month, I'm going to be joining Foreign Object again. Foreign Object is a great, I don't even know how to describe them, but they essentially bring people together for different theory discussions. They've brought in people from like that are CCRU adjacent or otherwise, like Ray Brezer. He's gone on there, gave some great talks, even if he is kind of unbearable to listen to sometimes because he's very cynical. But so am I, so it's okay. And we also did the memes and philosophy panel through them. So you'll recognize them for one of those 2 things if you recognize them, I think. But we are doing a 2-day seminar and workshop on building memes, especially philosophically inspired ones. So essentially a theorygram workshop for 2 days. That's the 14th and 15th of next month. And my last pitch, I believe, is that the 5th and final week of this month, the 31st, I believe it is, whatever the Saturday is, 30th or 31st, we are doing another open workshop. I have not yet decided on what that's going to be, but I'm figuring that out tomorrow. So that'll be another open workshop for anyone to join in on, and it'll be a good time. The last 2 of them have been great. Yeah,
Yep, for sure.
Damn it.
that's all my stuff. I got a lot of stuff. Yeah.
All right. John
Oh.
pitches. Guess. Oh, God, another one.
And just go to my Patreon so you can check all this stuff out. It's patreon.com/TRUNCATA. And we are doing the best we can right now. We donated all of the last batch to a family. We are going to do our best with either taking all the money from the podcast, from the workshop, and putting it either towards printing costs in the future so that we can produce something like a publication, or towards some other worthwhile causes, donations, things of the sort. I'm also very open to suggestions. So all this stuff is ultimately going to be towards a nonprofit cause. So you can give me money without giving me money if you think I'm an asshole.
Please give this man money.
Please give this man money.
Please give this man money. It's
Even
very
though
important.
he's an asshole.
Even though
Even though I'm an
profit
asshole.
even though profit itself is immoral.
Yeah,
Give this man
He's
money.
been there. He knows. All right, that's it. I'm done. I promise.
John, no pitches, I'm guessing.
No, I've got a pitch.
Oh,
Shit.
Uh,
Are you gonna be naked again?
You got the
I-
microphone directly inside your mouth is also what you got.
Yeah, no, I'd suggest to the listeners or the listener and the viewer, I guess.
Are they the same
Um,
person? Are
Yeah,
they the same entity? Okay.
They're not the same person, but they are
God
the same
bless.
entity.
yeah,
God bless you,
they're
entity.
they're at least 2
That
different
hurts,
people.
man. This hurts.
But my pitch is a suggestion to quit your job and stop participating.
Yeah.
Just see what happens. You might
I
be
actually
happy.
agree with that.
That's extraordinarily Nietzschean, like Nietzschean in the core sense of who Nietzsche actually was, not shitty
Find
Nazi
yourself.
interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
become
should do-
become Nietzsche's awesome. Like if
Teddy,
like, what's up, man?
I have some stuff I want to talk to you about after this.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
anytime, man. You know where I am.
Alright.
No, you
Yeah, I
should
do.
you should know where I am. Nobody should know where I am.
Teddy, I'm
I feel
gonna
where you
warn you
are.
in advance. You're like, I don't know, 3 or
life's
4
in
nights
danger.
of DMing away from seeing Dorian's butthole.
That's fine.
True.
That's okay.
So as far as pitches for me go, my life has been very tumultuous in the last couple of weeks. I promise that I am actually starting to work on some of these scripts for
God bless.
the standalone videos. More educational, more researched, less unstructured sort of banter back and forth or anything like that. Yeah, my partner's had like multiple surgeries in the last couple of weeks. So
She's
it's
a
been,
fucking hero about it. She's a champ.
yeah,
God bless.
she's a trooper. But it's also been very taxing on me, so I haven't had much time to work on side projects or anything like that. But now I'm able to start up on that stuff again. Maybe scrapping the idea I had about what's his fucking name?
Orwell.
Orwell. Thank you. Wow. See, I even forgot his name. That's how much I'm done with it.
H.G. Wells.
Maybe working on more abstract things than that. But we'll see how that goes. So that's my pitch. Is videos are eventually going to come. I promise. I know I've been promising it for a while, but things have been rough. So, anyways, yeah. Thank you for listening. We love you. Please take your medicine.
Please take mine too.
Make sure to save some for your friends.
Hi, Michael Deebs here, with no gun pointed at my head. Please know that all content created for the Benzo Rehab Dungeon is and always will be freely available. However, if you would like to support this creation of content, we here at Camp Benzo would appreciate it, as the production itself is not free of cost. Anything donated will go to covering the various subscription fees maintained for content production or improving and expanding the content produced. If you are able to, please head on over to patreon.com/BenzoRehabDungeon. We also have shirts for sale on Teespring, all priced as low as we can get them without turning much or any profit. They are mostly so that you can show your loved ones that a necessary intervention may be on the horizon. Links to the merchandise storefront and our various social media profiles can be found on our link tree, which is the word linktr.ee/BenzoRehabDungeon. As always, we love you. Please take your medicine.